There is a voice within you that has never forgotten who you are. It speaks not in the language of the world, not in words formed by lips or tongues or logic. It whispers in feelings. It nudges in stillness. It stirs gently in the moments between your thoughts. It doesn't argue. It doesn't plead. It simply knows. And that voice, that sacred whisper within you, is not separate from God. It is not the voice of reason or fear or societal conditioning. It is not your history, your memories, or the echo of others' opinions. It is the voice beneath all of that. It is the silence you return to when you are tired of running. It is the voice of Source, the sound of eternity murmuring through your human experience. It is your intuition, and it is the voice of God, not a God who lives outside of you, not a deity trapped in a skybound throne of judgment, but the infinite intelligence that breathes through every cell of your being. It is the divine presence expressing as your very life. It is the unspoken knowing, the spiritual GPS, the unfailing guidance that was placed within you, not as an accessory, but as a compass. You were never meant to be led from the outside in. You were meant to rise from the inside out. And yet, so many have forgotten. So many have learned to doubt their inner voice, to question their knowing, to suppress their light under the weight of logic and limitation. We live in a world that rewards conformity and punishes trust in the invisible. We are taught to seek approval rather than alignment, to gather knowledge rather than wisdom. But wisdom lives where knowledge ends, in the still, sacred space, where the heart speaks before the mind interrupts. You came here with guidance already built into your being, not as a test, but as a gift, not as a mystery, but as a map. That guidance is your intuition, and it will never lead you astray, because it is not powered by the ego. It is powered by God. And God does not guess. When you are quiet enough to hear it, when you have softened the noise of the world, when you have hushed the ego's need for control, you will discover that the clearest instructions for your life are already within you. The answers are not hidden in the stars. They are inscribed upon your soul. Intuition is not a skill, it is your nature. It is the language of your soul, the music of alignment, the gentle breath of eternity flowing through your temporary form. You are not meant to beg the universe for signs. You are meant to recognize that you are the sign. You are the signal. You are the receiver and the messenger. And when you honor that knowing, when you stop second guessing what you feel to be true, even if it makes no sense to the world, you begin to walk not by sight, but by inner light. You begin to live as you were meant to live, not reacting to the world, but responding to your spirit. You become led, not driven, guided, not forced. You begin to remember what it means to be whole. Intuition is the memory of God within you. It does not require explanation. It does not wait for evidence. It lives in certainty without needing clarity. It asks you to move before you understand, to trust before you see, to leap before you land. And this is where the miracle lives, in that sacred, terrifying, beautiful space between decision and understanding. You don't have to understand it to obey it. That's what trust is. That's what faith is. That's what alignment is. To say, I feel it, so I follow it. To say, I know it, even if I don't know how I know it. To say, this is the direction of peace, even if it's not the direction of logic. You are not meant to live your life in fear of being wrong. You are meant to live your life in joy of being aligned. Your intuition will never speak in fear. It does not manipulate. It does not shame. It does not scare you into action. That's the voice of conditioning, not the voice of God. The voice of God always comes as peace, as clarity, as resonance, even when it's asking you to walk away, even when it's asking you to let go, even when it's asking you to begin again, especially then. Because God never shouts, but the moment you trust your intuition, the whole universe seems to whisper, yes. And that's when miracles happen. Not because you earned them, not because you calculated them, but because you aligned with your source. There is nothing outside of you that can give you what your soul already knows. And the soul doesn't analyze, it knows. It does not rush. It reveals. It does not panic. It guides. It does not defend. It simply is. And when you begin to live in that space of inner surrender, when you stop seeking approval for what your soul already said yes to, then you begin to live a life of grace, a life of unfolding, a life not dictated by circumstance, but orchestrated by spirit. This is the beginning of true freedom. Not a freedom that screams, I can do whatever I want, but a deeper, quieter freedom that whispers, I am already whole and I trust my path. The mind will want to argue. The ego will want evidence. The world will want justification, but the soul will remain still and sure. And if you stay with that stillness long enough, you will discover that the voice you feared was too quiet was actually the most powerful force in your life. That the direction you questioned was actually the divine detour into destiny. That the feeling you ignored was actually the hand of God moving you before your mind could make sense of it. You don't need to wait for the right moment. The right moment is the one you feel called to move in, because God doesn't operate on the world's calendar. God moves in truth, and truth is always now. And so I invite you to listen again, not to the news, not to the noise, not to the voices of doubt masquerading as logic, but to the sacred compass within. That whisper that keeps returning, no matter how many times you try to rationalize it away, that pull that tugs at you when everything looks fine on the outside, but your spirit says, this isn't it. That moment of peace that comes, not when everything is perfect, but when you finally decide to trust what your soul has been trying to say all along. That is the voice of God. Not a booming thunder in the sky, but the quiet certainty in your chest. The sacred knowing that doesn't need validation to be true. It just is. And the more you trust it, the louder it becomes. The more you act on it, the more aligned your life becomes. The more you honor it, the more you live as who you truly are. Because you are not here to follow maps drawn by others. You are here to follow the light placed within you. You are not here to convince the world of your path. You are here to walk it. You are not here to seek answers from those who have not heard your calling. You are here to answer the call, even if no one else hears it, especially then, because the voice of God was never meant to be outsourced. It lives in you, and it's been waiting for you to remember. There is a sacred ache in you that nothing in the world can satisfy, because it is not calling you toward the world. It is calling you back to yourself, to your essence, to the wisdom that has never left you, to the voice that existed before you had a name or a body or a single thought of doubt. That ache is not a flaw. It is a summons. It is the invitation of your intuition to come home, not to a place, but to a presence, to the stillness beneath your striving, to the knowing beneath your questions, to the divine within the human. You are not lost. You are being recalibrated, realigned, reawakened. You have been conditioned to look outside for answers, for approval, for safety, for validation. But everything outside of you is temporary. It shifts, it changes, it decays. Only what is within you is eternal. Only what is within you is real. Only what is within you can lead you to peace. And that is why the voice of your intuition will often pull you away from what the world calls success and lead you toward what the soul calls truth. Sometimes that voice will ask you to slow down when the world wants you to hurry. Sometimes it will ask you to let go when the world wants you to hold on. Sometimes it will ask you to walk away from the noise and sit quietly with your own being, not to isolate, but to integrate, not to escape, but to remember. Because the voice of God does not drive you, it draws you. It does not shame you into movement. It inspires you into alignment. And it does not reward you for ignoring it, It waits with infinite patience, knowing that you will return when you are ready, and when you are ready, you will remember that you never left. You were never separate from your source. You were never abandoned by the divine. You were never cut off from your guidance. You simply got distracted by the world's volume, and now you are learning how to hear again. To hear not with your ears, but with your soul. To feel not with your mind, but with your heart. To know not by reason, but by resonance. That is how truth speaks. It resonates. It stirs. It vibrates in the bones. It sends a quiet yes into the center of your being before the mind has a chance to interrupt. That is how you know it's real. Not because it makes sense, but because it makes peace, because it aligns, because it harmonizes, because it softens the edges of your life and brings you back into rhythm with the sacred. We live in a society that calls intuition irrational, as though the deepest wisdom must always come with spreadsheets and statistics. But what if the deepest truth has nothing to do with calculation and everything to do with connection? What if your intuition is the original intelligence, the pure awareness that knows before it thinks? What if God is not trying to make you smarter, but trying to make you still? Still enough to hear, still enough to feel, still enough to follow. Because every time you pause to honor that sacred whisper, you become a vessel through which the infinite can flow. And that flow is not random. It is not arbitrary. It is divine orchestration. Your intuition is not a reaction, it is a revelation. It does not arise from fear. It does not rise from panic. It rises from presence. It emerges from the timeless dimension of you, where you are already one with the wisdom of the universe. It is the place within you that cannot be fooled by appearances, that cannot be shaken by circumstance, that cannot be silenced by fear, because it knows, and knowing cannot be unknown. And once you begin to live from that place, you become unshakable. Not because life becomes easy, but because you become anchored in what is real. You no longer chase what the ego wants. You allow what the soul knows. You no longer force outcomes. You align with direction. You no longer beg for signs. You embody the signal. And your life begins to shift, not in noise, but in depth. Not in show, but in soul. This is what it means to walk with God, not to follow rules written in books, but to walk in step with the divine compass within you. To say yes when the world says you're crazy. To step forward when logic says stay. To trust the invisible more than the obvious. To move in faith not because you are certain of the path, but because you are certain of the presence that walks with you. And that presence lives in your intuition. It is not something you summon, it is something you surrender to. It is not something you must prove, it is something you must trust. Because when you trust it, you are trusting God. Not the God of fear, not the God of punishment, but the God of peace, the God of love, the God of truth, the God that does not live in buildings but in breath, the God that does not speak through judgment but through joy, the God that does not threaten but invites. And when you live from that invitation, your life becomes the evidence of divinity. You become a lighthouse, not shouting, not preaching, just being, just glowing. You become a channel, not grasping, not pushing, just flowing, just following. You become a sanctuary, not perfect, not finished, but grounded in something deeper than understanding. Because you don't need to understand the whole path. You just need to honor the next step. And that next step will be revealed through your intuition. The more you listen, the more you will hear. The more you follow, the more clear the path becomes. The more you obey that quiet nudge, the more miraculous your life becomes, not because you control it, but because you surrender to something higher. And in that surrender, you discover that the path was never something you had to find, it was always something you had to feel. You are not here to follow a formula. You are here to follow the fire within you. You are not here to ask permission. You are here to follow your peace. You are not here to be led by fear. You are here to be guided by the light of truth. And that truth, that still, unwavering, sacred truth, is what lives inside your intuition. You may call it instinct, you may call it guidance, you may call it gut feeling, but it is and has always been the voice of God. The question is not whether God is speaking. The question is, are you willing to hear? Are you willing to trust the invisible? Are you willing to honor what you feel even when you cannot explain it? Are you willing to move without proof? Are you willing to release the need for certainty and instead step into divine clarity? Because that is what intuition asks of you, not to be perfect, but to be present. Not to be sure of the destination, but to be available to the guidance. Not to wait until the fear goes away, but to move in faith anyway. You are not weak for not knowing everything. You are powerful for trusting what you do know, even if it's only a whisper. Because that whisper is not small. That whisper is sacred. And if you follow it, it will lead you to the life your soul has always known was possible. Let the world call you irrational. Let the world call you wild. Let the world call you strange. But let your soul call you home, because that is where the voice of God has always lived, not in the noise, but in the knowing. And the moment you trust it, you return to who you truly are. The most profound truths in your life will not be shouted, they will be whispered from within. And it takes a still soul to hear a whisper. You don't need more noise to find your path. You need less distraction, less striving, less proving, less becoming. Because the truth is, the more you strip away who you are not, the more clearly you will hear the voice of who you are. You were never disconnected from divine guidance. You were simply tuned in to the wrong station. The station of the world, the voices of fear, the static of comparison, the noise of doubt. But the voice of your intuition has always been playing, like a sacred frequency vibrating just beneath the surface of your awareness. It has waited patiently for you to come back to yourself. It never forces, it never shouts, it never begs for your attention. It simply waits quietly, lovingly, fully present. Because God does not coerce, God invites. And the invitation is always the same: come home, return to your truth, return to your center, return to the stillness within you, where the voice of the divine lives in the rhythm of your own heartbeat. You don't have to journey to mountaintops to hear God. You don't have to traverse oceans or read 1,000 books. You don't have to earn the right to receive divine guidance. You are already worthy, already wired, already whole. All you have to do is become quiet enough to feel what has always been there. The answers you seek are not in the chaos. They're not in the opinions, the algorithms, the headlines, or the noise. They live in the space you keep avoiding: the silence, the surrender, the sacred emptiness, where the mind steps aside and the soul takes the lead. It is in the silence that the soul begins to speak. It is in the stillness that God becomes audible. It is in the surrender that intuition becomes clear. You cannot rush divine timing. You cannot manipulate divine answers, but you can open. You can receive. You can soften the clenched fists of control and create space for the voice of God to echo through your being. And what a voice it is, not one of condemnation, but of compassion. Not one of judgment, but of joy. Not one of punishment, but of peace. It is the voice that speaks through resonance, through alignment, through a knowing so deep that it bypasses the mind altogether. Intuition is not loud, but it is unmistakable. It may begin as a flicker, a sudden sense, a subtle pull, a quiet knowing in your chest that something is either deeply right or no longer aligned. And your mind will try to override it. Your ego will demand evidence. The world will ask for explanation. But your soul will simply know. Because when you're in alignment, peace comes without proof. And when you're out of alignment, discomfort comes without reason. This is how your soul speaks, not to scare you, but to guide you, not to control you, but to liberate you. The voice of God within you does not demand your obedience. It gently awakens your remembrance. It reminds you that you were not born to be confused, to be lost, to be disconnected. You were born to be guided from within by an eternal intelligence that has never abandoned you, not for one breath, not for one heartbeat. You were born with a sacred light that does not flicker when the world darkens, a compass that does not fail in the storms, a whisper that cannot be drowned out unless you choose to believe that the noise is more real than the knowing. And when you finally stop asking for permission to trust your inner voice, everything changes. Your path clears, your burdens lift, your soul breathes. Not because the world became easier, but because you became anchored in something deeper than approval, stronger than logic, and more powerful than fear. You are no longer driven by reaction. You are moved by response. You are no longer waiting for the world to choose you. You are remembering that you were already chosen by the divine, by your own soul, by the very breath that lives inside you. This is what it means to live in alignment. To feel instead of force, to honor instead of explain, to move from soul, not ego, to trust that the direction which brings the most peace, even if it doesn't make sense, is the direction of God. And the more you follow it, the louder it becomes. The more you surrender to it, the clearer the path becomes. The more you embody it, the more miraculous your life becomes, not because you manipulated the outcome, but because you harmonized with your true nature. Your intuition is not separate from God. It is not a feature. It is your foundation. It is the voice of the divine expressed through your unique form. And when you listen to it, you are not just trusting yourself, you are trusting the source that made you. You are not acting alone. You are dancing with the invisible intelligence that keeps the stars from colliding, the tides from stopping, the breath from failing. That same intelligence is inside you, guiding you, loving you, whispering to you in moments when you're willing to pause long enough to hear. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to be logical. It only needs to be true. And truth does not shout, it resonates. When you feel a deep yes, even if you can't explain why, follow it. When you feel a quiet no, even if the world says yes, honor it. You are not here to be understood by the world. You are here to be aligned with your soul. And your soul speaks through your intuition, that sacred, silent, ever faithful voice of God that has been guiding you home from the very beginning. The moment you begin to trust the invisible is the moment you become truly free. Free from the tyranny of others' opinions, free from the obsession with outcomes, free from the exhausting game of trying to figure everything out before you take the next step, because life is not meant to be figured out, it is meant to be felt. And intuition is how you feel your way into alignment with your highest self. You don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step. You only need to know that the step you're on feels right. You only need to feel the yes in your chest, that quiet assurance that rises not from fear, but from faith. Faith in the unseen, faith in the guidance, faith in the feeling, because the feeling is the form. Everything that has manifested in your life began as an invisible nudge, a moment of inspiration, a whisper of potential. That is the birthplace of creation. That is where God plants seeds, not in the noise of logic, but in the fertile soil of your inner knowing. And when you trust that knowing, even without a plan, even without applause, even without a guarantee, you become unstoppable. Not because you're forcing life, but because you are flowing with it. Flow is not something you manufacture, it's something you allow. And you allow it by listening. Listening not just with your ears, but with your presence, with your sensitivity, with the soft, sacred spaces of your being that the world has taught you to harden. You were never meant to harden. You were meant to feel. You were meant to soften into truth, to melt into love, to dissolve into trust. And intuition is the thread that leads you there, back to your essence, back to the divine, back to the eternal place inside of you that has never been afraid. That place does not panic. That place does not chase. That place does not beg. It simply radiates. And when you live from that place, you don't need to seek signs. You become the sign. You become a living demonstration of what it looks like to walk with God, not by dogma, not by doctrine, but by listening, by feeling, by honoring what stirs in you, even when the world tries to silence it. The world will always have something to say about your path, but the world does not know the sacred contract written on your soul. The world does not know what you came here to be, to learn, to unlearn, to remember. Only you and God know that. And God is speaking to you not just through sunsets and synchronicities, but through the feeling in your gut that won't go away. That nudge to call someone, that pull to walk away, that stirring to create, to rest, to change direction. That peace that arises when you make a choice that no one else understands, but you do. Because you weren't looking for logic. You were listening for love. And love always speaks through intuition. Love does not yell. Love does not rush. Love does not confuse. Love is clear. Love is kind. Love is knowing. And your intuition, when you strip it down to its essence, is love guiding you home. It doesn't need you to be fearless. It only needs you to be honest. Honest enough to admit when something feels wrong. Honest enough to admit when something feels right. Honest enough to stop pretending you don't know what you already know. Because you do know, you've always known. You've just been waiting for permission to trust it. And now you realize the permission has to come from you. You don't need anyone to validate your inner truth. You don't need a panel of approval for your peace. You don't need the world to agree in order to move. You only need to honor the quiet yes that rises from your soul when you're finally listening. That is the compass. That is the clarity. That is the voice of God. And it's not somewhere outside of you. It's not in the sky. It's not in the noise. It's in the silence. It's in the breath. It's in the moment you stop looking and start remembering. Remembering that you are not separate. Remembering that you are not lost. Remembering that you are not broken. You are a vessel of the divine. You are a child of the infinite. You are a channel of wisdom, a beacon of truth, a receiver of sacred direction. And every time you follow that direction, without needing explanation, without needing applause, you become more of who you really are. You become light in motion. You become love made visible. You become the voice of God. Not just hearing it, but living it. And that is what the world needs. Not more noise, but more people who are deeply, faithfully, unapologetically aligned with their inner knowing. Because when you live from that place, you don't just change your life, you change the energy around you. You create ripples. You create resonance. You become an invitation for others to listen, to soften, to return, not because you told them to, but because you showed them what it looks like. And that is the greatest gift you could ever give. You are not here to survive the world. You are here to awaken within it. You are here to walk not as a seeker of light, but as its embodiment. You are here to live not as someone searching for answers, but as one who finally remembers the answer has always been inside. Your intuition is the sacred language of that remembrance. It is the fingerprint of God upon your soul, pressing gently into your awareness, saying, this is the way, not the way of the world, not the way of the herd, not the way of your history, but the way of truth, the way of resonance, the way of the divine unfolding through you. And to trust that voice is the most radical act of self-love. To follow that voice is the highest form of spiritual alignment. To embody that voice is to become what you came here to be, a living, breathing, radiating extension of the infinite, moving through time and space as light, as grace, as freedom. This is what it means to be liberated. Not to escape, but to remember. Not to transcend, but to embody. Not to become something new, but to return to what you have always been, whole, guided, deeply known, infinitely loved. You do not need more advice. You do not need more strategies. You do not need another guru to lead you where your soul already stands. You need to trust yourself. You need to be still long enough to recognize the quiet pulse of divinity moving within you. You need to let the noise fall away. You need to stop postponing your peace, because your peace is not in the outcome. Your peace is in the listening. Your peace is in the aligning. Your peace is in the surrender. And that surrender is not weakness, it is power. The kind of power that does not shout, the kind of power that does not need to prove, the kind of power that rises from still waters and cannot be moved. That is the power of your intuition. And the more you trust it, the more you will feel the presence of God, not as a concept, but as a living current within your life. Not a God you must earn, not a God you must fear, but a God that lives and breathes and whispers through the quiet channels of your being. And every time you listen, you come back into harmony with the sacred. Every time you follow that voice, you walk in step with the infinite. Every time you obey that inner nudge, you are reborn, not into someone new, but into who you already are beneath the illusion. So let this be your practice. Let stillness become your sanctuary. Let trust become your strength. Let peace become your direction. And let intuition become your religion, not bound by dogma, but liberated by experience. Let the soft nudge in your chest mean more to you than all the advice in the world. Let the gentle knowing inside, you have the final say. Let your life be a testament to what happens when you no longer betray your own wisdom. Because you were never meant to crawl through life with eyes turned outward and ears tuned only to noise. You were meant to rise, to soften, to awaken, guided by the invisible, led by the sacred, moved by the light within. The world may call it strange, but your soul calls it truth. The world may call it reckless, but your soul calls it freedom. The world may call it foolish, but your soul calls it home. And that is all you need to know. When it feels like home, it is God. When it feels like love, it is truth. When it feels like peace, it is the path. You no longer need to justify what your soul already knows. You no longer need to delay what your spirit already said yes to. You no longer need to wait for the right moment. You are the moment. You are the sign. You are the voice when you remember to listen. So now, breathe. Feel the stillness beneath your thoughts. Let go of the war inside your mind. And listen. Listen with your heart. Listen with your breath. Listen with the part of you that has always been eternal. The voice is already there. It has always been there, and it will never lead you astray. Not because it knows the way, but because it is the way home, the way inward, the way to God. And now you remember, you are not separate. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are divine. You are guided. You are free. You are whole. And your intuition, quiet, steady, faithful, will always, always lead you back to that truth. Let it speak. Let it move you. Let it become the rhythm of your life. Because the voice of God is not waiting above. It is rising within. And it has chosen you to listen, to follow, to live, to become, to remember, and now you do. There comes a moment in every life when the soul whispers softly at first that something isn't right, that despite the things you've gathered, the achievements you've counted, the steps you've followed, something remains untouched, unawakened, unfulfilled. Not because life has failed you, but because your thoughts have not yet remembered their power. You see, you are not merely a body moving through the world. You are a field of consciousness creating it. And the lens through which you look at the world, your thoughts, is not a passive reflection of life, but the very projector of its quality. What you think is not just commentary, it's alchemy. You don't see things as they are. You see things as you are through the stories you've chosen, through the meanings you've inherited, through the emotions you allow to linger like smoke in the chambers of your mind. Your outer world is always mirroring the dominant vibration of your inner world. And your thinking, moment by moment, is the tuning fork. The universe
Being eternally impartial says only this: as you believe, so shall it be done unto you. You are not what the world calls you. You are not your name, your title, your reputation, or your fears. You are the thinker behind the thoughts, the dreamer behind the mask, the awareness, watching it all unfold, and waiting, always waiting, for you to reclaim your authorship of this life. Most people never pause to wonder, who is doing the thinking in here? And where did these thoughts come from? They repeat patterns like a song stuck on repeat. Songs of lack, of worry, of comparison, of judgment, never realizing that they are dancing to music. They never chose that their mind has become a house built by strangers, and now they live inside it, calling it truth. But thought is not fixed. It is fluid. It can be questioned, it can be healed, it can be elevated, and when it is, life itself begins to take a new shape. The quality of your life is not determined by the conditions you're in, but by the conversations you're having with yourself about those conditions. It's not the storm that breaks you. It's the belief that you cannot sail through it. Begin to listen, truly listen, to the voice that speaks just beneath the noise, the still, silent knowing that's always been with you. It doesn't shout, it doesn't panic, it doesn't echo the world's madness. It simply reminds you, you are not your thoughts. You are the one who chooses which thoughts get to stay. And that is the first liberation, to recognize that you are not a prisoner of your thinking. You are its master. But mastery begins with awareness. Every moment you catch yourself thinking a thought that limits you, a thought that shrinks your spirit or dim your light, is a holy moment, a spiritual opportunity. Not to shame yourself, but to remember yourself. To remember that no one installed that thought without your permission, and that now, in this breath, you can choose again. The quality of your life is not waiting at the end of some distant achievement. It is shaped, molded in the unseen furnace of your inner dialogue. Do you feed the flame of resentment? Do you pour gasoline on thoughts of fear, of not being enough, of being left behind? Do you carry the past into today like a sack of stones, repeating, "This is just how I am," as if your identity were carved in stone rather than breathed into being? Or do you wake up each morning and choose a new vibration? Do you speak to yourself with love before the world gets a chance to interfere? Do you plant thoughts of peace, joy, forgiveness, and water them with presence until they bloom into a life that reflects your soul? Most people treat thoughts like facts, but thoughts are just clouds passing through the vast sky of your awareness. You are not the cloud, you are the sky. And in that realization, you are free. Let me ask you gently, what have you been thinking about today? Because that's what you've been living. The world around you is echoing back the tone you set in silence, and nothing will change until the thinking does. So if you want to heal your relationships, change your thinking about connection. If you want to find peace, change your thinking about the past. If you want to create abundance, change your thinking about worth. And if you want to love yourself, change your thinking about who you believe you are. It is never about adding more. It is always about subtracting the noise. You were born whole. You were born wise. You were born connected to the divine. And every thought that told you otherwise was an illusion borrowed from a world that forgot how to see. But today you remember, that is the beginning of everything. The moment you begin to observe your thinking without becoming it, something miraculous happens. A quiet space opens up between stimulus and response. between the noise of the world and the whisper of your soul. In that space lives your power not to react, but to choose, not to cling, but to release, not to fear, but to trust. And that single shift from automatic to aware begins to alter the very texture of your life. You stop being dragged by circumstance and start becoming guided by consciousness. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable and begin to align with what is eternal within you. There is no circumstance outside of you that holds more weight than the thoughts you are rehearsing inside you. You may not control what others do, what they say, or what has already happened, but you do control the meaning you assign to it. And meaning is everything. A thought of betrayal can become a teacher of boundaries. A thought of loss can become a doorway to gratitude. A thought of failure can become the seed of wisdom. It all depends on the thinker. We've been conditioned to believe that happiness is circumstantial, that peace is a destination, that worth must be proven. But none of that is true. It never was. The outer world is merely the shadow cast by the shape of your thoughts. And when you sculpt those thoughts with love, with intention, with a gentle but firm sense of presence, the world reflects a beauty that was waiting all along. No spiritual teacher, no enlightened soul ever reached peace by rearranging the furniture of the world. They reached it by rearranging the architecture of their inner world. They learned to master the mind, to see through its tricks, to soften the grip of judgment, and to return again and again to the spaciousness of now. They did not wait for perfect conditions. They created a perfect perception. And that is the invitation for you. The quality of your life is shaped by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Not, why is this happening to me? But what is this showing me? Not, what do I lack? But what is life trying to bring forward in me through this? The quality of your thinking is determined by your willingness to surrender the need to be right, to be certain, to be in control. Because real transformation does not come from control. It comes from trust. It comes from the surrender of false stories and the embrace of the sacred present. You were not born to ruminate in regret or spiral in worry. You were born to create. And your primary creation is the thought you allow to take root in your mind. That thought becomes emotion. That emotion becomes behavior. That behavior becomes character. And character becomes destiny. Trace it all back, and it begins with one silent seed, one thought. So plant well. Think of your thoughts as guests in the temple of your mind. Who are you letting in today? Who are you allowing to sit at the table of your awareness? Are they voices of fear or faith? Are they the voices of past wounds or present miracles? You are the gatekeeper. You are the master gardener. And whatever you nourish within will blossom in the world without. Do not underestimate this power. It is not a metaphor. It is spiritual law. Change the frequency of your thoughts, and you will alter the symphony of your life. This is not about positive thinking for the sake of ignoring pain. It is about conscious thinking that acknowledges pain but does not build a home inside it. It is about choosing the higher perspective, even when the lower one screams louder. It is about rising not because the world demands it, but because your soul remembers its wings. And yes, there will be days when the old thoughts return, when the inner critic bangs on the door, when the fog sets in again. That's okay. This is not a path of perfection. It is a path of presence. And presence is a practice. Every moment you return to your breath, every moment you observe without judgment, every moment you choose a higher thought that is victory, that is healing, that is awakening. Your thoughts are not who you are. They are passing weather systems in the vast sky of your being. Let them come, let them go, but don't let them build cities without your consent. Don't let them shape your life from unconscious repetition. You are not here to be a mirror of past programming. You are here to be a lighthouse, steady, awake, and rooted in truth. Let go of the belief that change begins outside of you. Let go of the belief that one day, when circumstances are just right, then you'll feel peace. The truth is simpler and more liberating. When you choose peaceful thoughts, your life becomes peaceful. When you think thoughts of compassion, you walk in compassion. When you honor yourself in thought, the world begins to honor you. It's not magic, it's alignment. And alignment begins when the mind remembers its servant role, not its master role. When the ego is seen clearly not as an enemy, but as a confused guide doing its best to protect you through fear. But you, dear soul, do not need to be protected by fear. You need to be liberated by truth. And the truth is this: your thinking shapes your frequency. And your frequency writes the melody your life will play. Then listen deeply now. Not just with your ears, but with the whole of your being, with the space behind your chest where the silence lives, with the gentle fire of awareness that never flickers, no matter how chaotic the world becomes. That space knows your life is not dictated by chance, nor is it controlled by fate. It is directed by the silent compass of your attention, and your attention always flows in the direction of your thoughts. Where your focus goes, your energy grows. Where your energy grows, your reality unfolds. And the seed of it all is thought. So if your life feels noisy, heavy, cluttered with conflict and confusion, the answer is not to rearrange the people around you or chase more distractions. The answer is to cleanse the temple of your mind. Dust off the old assumptions, wash away the fear-stained beliefs, open the windows of perception, and let the light of awareness pour in. Ask yourself, is this thought bringing me closer to freedom or further into suffering? That one question, asked honestly and gently, can save a lifetime of unnecessary pain. You do not need to believe every thought you think. You are not obligated to obey the voices that echo with limitation, fear, or doubt. You are allowed to pause, to breathe, to question. You are allowed to say, I no longer choose to live under that belief. And in that moment, chains begin to fall. Not the kind you see with your eyes, but the kind that have been weighing down your spirit for years. And that release, that sweet, invisible liberation, that is the soul beginning to remember itself. Many people are walking through life asleep to the miracle of their mind, asleep to the truth that heaven and hell are not places we go, but frequencies we choose. A thought of bitterness is a step toward hell. A thought of compassion is a step toward heaven. And these steps, taken moment by moment, build the path your feet will follow. Do not wait for a burning bush. Do not wait for thunder in the sky or a voice to break through the clouds. The voice is already inside you. It speaks in the silence. It speaks when you slow down long enough to hear the deeper questions. What am I rehearsing in my mind each day? What am I practicing with my inner dialogue? And does it serve the life I truly want to live? Because here is the hidden truth. You are always practicing something. Every thought you entertain, every judgment you accept, every fear you repeat, you are strengthening a pathway in your mind. That pathway becomes the direction of your life. So ask yourself, is this a path of light? Is this a path of freedom? Or am I unconsciously paving roads to old prisons? You are not broken. You are not behind. You are simply ready to awaken. That is why these words resonate. Not because they are new, but because they are ancient truths you've always known. Deep down, beneath the noise, beneath the conditioning, beneath the expectations, your soul has always whispered, I am the thinker. I am the chooser. And I am free to choose again. Begin now. Begin today. Let this moment be the turning point, not the dramatic kind that needs lightning bolts or emotional fireworks, but the quiet kind where the soul simply stands up and says, no more thoughts that shrink me, no more stories that shame me, no more identities borrowed from pain. In their place, You begin to plant the seeds of clarity, of love, of worthiness. You begin to think as if life is on your side. You begin to believe that peace is not something to chase, but something to allow. You begin to live from the knowing that you are enough, not because you proved it, but because you remembered it. And that shift, subtle though it may be, is how miracles begin. Because when you change the way you think, you change the way you feel. When you change the way you feel, you change what you believe is possible. And when you change what you believe is possible, the universe rearranges itself to reflect that belief. Not because it was withholding, but because you were. You were withholding permission to receive because you didn't believe you were worthy. You were withholding love because you were afraid of being hurt. You were withholding peace because you thought chaos was your default setting. But now you begin to allow. And allowing begins with a thought. A single thought that whispers, what if the old story is not the truth? And once that thought enters, the whole house of illusion begins to shake. Because the mind that has built its home on fear cannot withstand the gentle wind of truth. That truth is simple. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not the voice that says you'll never make it. You are the awareness that hears that voice and chooses something higher. So today, choose again. Choose the thought that lifts you. Choose the thought that brings you back to stillness. Choose the thought that speaks to your future, not your fear. And when you forget, because you will simply remember that forgetting is part of remembering. Falling asleep is part of waking up. There is no shame in it, only grace. The quality of your life is not about what you have. It is not about what they think. It is about what you believe, what you nurture, what you entertain in the invisible world of your mind. And that is where your greatest work must begin, not in trying to force the external, but in softening, cleansing, and renewing the internal. Because when the internal world is healed, the external world becomes a mirror of that healing. And you become the light you were seeking. And when you become the light you were seeking, you stop chasing shadows. You stop grasping at empty promises wrapped in noise. You stop running from yourself because you finally realize there is nowhere to run. Everything you've ever wanted was already resting within the quiet space of your own being, waiting for your thoughts to align with its presence, not to earn it, but to see it, to see that your worth was never in question, only in recognition, that love was never absent, only obscured by the fog of conditioned belief. There is a profound shift that happens when you stop thinking in reaction and begin thinking in creation. When you stop allowing every passing fear to dictate your emotional climate and instead become the conscious author of your internal world. In that shift, you stop being a thermometer reacting to the temperature of the world, and you become the thermostat setting the tone of your life from the inside out. That is not philosophy, that is power. That is freedom, that is mastery. It doesn't happen by force, it happens by remembrance. And remembering is a sacred act. It's sitting in stillness long enough to hear the thoughts beneath the thoughts. It's breathing deeply enough to separate the truth from the trauma. It's choosing to become the observer instead of the reactor again and again until the old wiring begins to dissolve and a new way of being begins to rise. You cannot think your way to peace through judgment. You cannot think your way to love through resistance. But you can return always to a thought that is in harmony with who you truly are. A thought of grace, a thought of openness, a thought of I am already enough. And from that thought, a new vibration radiates outward, not in a shout, but in a silent frequency that draws new realities to your feet. Your job is not to fix the world. Your job is to think in alignment with truth and let the world respond to your alignment. That's how reality changes, not from resistance, but from resonance. If you don't like what life is reflecting, look not at the mirror, but at the face you're presenting to it. Change the internal pattern, and the reflection must follow. So many of us are addicted to fixing. We want to fix the job, the relationship, the circumstances. But rarely do we stop to examine the thinking that attracted those circumstances to begin with. And until that examination takes place, we find ourselves repeating the same storylines with different characters. Because the pattern was never out there, it was in here, in the thoughts we chose to believe, in the identities we wore like armor, in the narratives we never questioned. But now you see it. And with that seeing comes choice. And with choice comes healing. And with healing comes liberation. This is your turning point. Not because the stars have aligned, not because the world has suddenly become easier, but because you've decided to no longer abandon yourself with your thoughts. You've decided to no longer speak to yourself in ways you would never speak to another soul. You've decided to no longer give your power away to fleeting fears and old scripts. You've decided at last to come home to yourself. And home is not a place. It is a state of being. It is the vibration of love you allow yourself to rest in. It is the clarity that emerges when the mind softens. It is the deep, unwavering knowing that you are not here to be perfect, but to be whole. Not here to compete, but to contribute. Not here to survive, but to awaken. And awakening begins with thought. Not loud ones, not dramatic ones, but subtle, consistent thoughts of truth. Thoughts like, I am not my past. I am not this fear. I am not a victim of circumstance. I am a divine being, temporarily inhabiting form. I am allowed to think new thoughts. I am allowed to release the old. I am allowed to create a new reality, starting now, and then you do. Not all at once, but moment by moment, thought by thought, and those small shifts begin to gather, like droplets that become a stream, a current, a river, and finally a sea of transformation. You look around and the world seems to smile back, not because it has changed, but because you have. Your thinking has softened, your frequency has elevated, and the quality of your life has become the natural result. And as you continue on this path, not forward, but inward, you begin to realize that life has always been speaking to you in the language of reflection. Not punishment, not reward, but feedback. It shows you again and again the quality of your thoughts made visible. If your world is chaotic, perhaps your inner world has been cluttered. If your days feel heavy, perhaps your thoughts have been weighted by beliefs that no longer serve you. This is not to blame, this is to empower. Because if thought created it, thought can change it. You are not here to control every outcome. You are here to master your inner response to each outcome. That mastery is not stoicism, it is sacred receptivity. It is the art of choosing peace without the need for perfection. It is the quiet strength of being grounded in awareness, no matter what storms may come. And that grounding begins with one sacred habit: choosing higher thoughts. This is not about positive thinking as a mask. This is about truthful thinking as a mirror. Thinking that does not pretend life is perfect, but sees clearly that you are not the victim of it. That even when you do not control the wind, you can still set your sail, and your thoughts are the sail. So when the day begins, ask yourself, what direction will I sail today? Will you drift with the currents of fear? Will you replay the grievances of yesterday and call it truth? Will you grip tightly to your judgments and call it strength? Or will you release, not because you're giving up, but because you're waking up? Waking up to the truth that your mind is not a prison unless you let it become one. Your power lies in awareness. Awareness that watches thought without clinging to it. Awareness that sees a fearful thought and smiles gently, saying, I hear you, but I do not follow you. Awareness that witnesses an old wound rising and says, I understand. And I choose to bless it, not repeat it. This is the quiet revolution, the inner uprising that changes everything not by force but by vision, by returning to the truth that thought is creative, not reactive, that your experience of life is not happening to you, but through you, through the lens of your beliefs, through the patterns of your focus, through the tone of your self-talk. Speak to yourself kindly, not because it's trendy, but because your cells are listening, your nervous system is listening, your energy field is listening, and every thought you repeat becomes a vibration in your body, a signal to your reality, a prophecy unfolding in silence. So speak with reverence, even when you're tired, even when you're unsure, especially when you're afraid. That is when the power of your thinking becomes sacred. That is when you step not into illusion, but into alignment, into truth, into love. Not love as sentiment, but love as vibration, love as clarity. Love as the refusal to think thoughts that betray your divinity. Let your thinking become a prayer, not with folded hands, but with an open mind. Let every thought be a candle lit in the dark room of unconsciousness. Let your inner dialogue reflect your divine inheritance, not your conditioned past. You are not here to rehearse wounds. You are here to remember wholeness. And when you forget, as we all do, return again. Return to the breath, return to the stillness, return to the observer within you who has never been harmed, never been afraid, never been less than divine. That witness within you is your anchor. And when your thinking returns to that awareness, the world begins to respond in kind. You may notice people treating you differently. You may find synchronicities arriving with more ease. You may watch as what once felt like effort begins to feel like flow. This is not coincidence. This is coherence. Coherence between who you are, how you think, and what you allow yourself to feel. And when that coherence is present, miracles are not rare, they are natural, because miracles are not events. They are perceptions. They are shifts in thinking from fear to love, from lack to trust, from separation to unity. And the more often you allow that shift in the quiet space of your mind, the more your entire life becomes a sanctuary of grace. You were never broken. You were only believing broken thoughts. You were never unworthy. You were only echoing unworthy beliefs. You were never disconnected. You were only distracted. And now you remember. You remember that every thought is a paintbrush, and your life is the canvas. Paint with intention. Paint with vision. Paint with love. Because the masterpiece of your life is not made with your hands. It's made with your mind. Then let us keep walking gently, steadily, down this sacred path of remembering. Because remembering who you are is not a grand announcement, not a mountaintop moment with trumpets and crowds. It is a soft return, a humble realignment with the center of your being. And that return begins with a single conscious thought. I no longer choose to think in opposition to my soul. You see, the soul doesn't argue. It doesn't scream. It doesn't compete for your attention. It simply waits quietly, faithfully, lovingly beneath the chatter of the mind. And when your thinking finally slows, when you stop rehearsing the noise long enough to be still, you feel it. That calm, sacred knowing, that presence that cannot be described, only experienced. That is who you are beneath the thoughts. But most people never meet that presence because they are too busy managing a mind that was never taught how to rest. A mind trained in survival, not serenity. A mind so addicted to solving problems that it forgets the greatest solution is often surrender. And here's the paradox. The more you try to control your thinking through force, the more chaotic it becomes. Because the ego loves a fight, but the soul whispers, There is nothing to fight. There is only something to release. So release it. Release the idea that your thoughts define you. Release the belief that your worth must be earned. Release the illusion that peace is conditional. And in that releasing, you begin to rise, not with effort, but with ease. Because the heavy thoughts fall away, and what remains is light. And what is light always remembers how to rise. The quality of your life, beloved, is not about the things you can accumulate, not about the titles you can achieve, not even about the milestones you cross. The quality of your life is about the quality of your presence. And presence is the gift you give yourself when your thoughts no longer drag you away from the now. In this moment here, now there is no problem. There is only breath. There is only being. And there is the choice right here to think a thought that brings you closer to peace. A thought that opens the window rather than slams the door. A thought that loves instead of judges. A thought that forgives instead of punishes. A thought that lifts instead of locks. And yes, you are allowed to choose those thoughts, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because those are the moments that shape the landscape of your life. Anyone can think beautifully when things are easy, but to think lovingly in the face of fear, to think kindly when the world is cruel, to think abundantly when the bank account says otherwise, that is the true power of spiritual maturity. That is the fire of awakened thinking. That is the light that cannot be put out by circumstance. You are not your old reactions. You are not your unconscious habits. You are not your childhood programming. You are not your inner critic. You are not your inherited shame. You are not the wounds of your lineage. You are the sky that holds it all. You are the space between the thoughts. You are the stillness beneath the storm. And in that stillness, you are free. From this stillness, begin again. Begin thinking in the language of truth. I am here. I am whole. I am aligned. I am willing. I am enough. You don't need the world to agree with you to think in alignment with love. You don't need proof to think in alignment with abundance. You don't need apologies to think in alignment with forgiveness. The outer world does not need to shift first. You do. And once you do, the world, as if by divine reflection, follows. Not always instantly, not always in the ways you expect, but always faithfully, because your outer world is a delayed reflection of your inner devotion. So devote yourself to thoughts that heal, to thoughts that build, to thoughts that honor your sacredness. Devote yourself to thinking like someone who knows they are connected to Source, because you are. You always have been. No thought can sever that connection. But every thought can either obscure it or reveal it. Choose the thoughts that reveal. Choose the thoughts that set you free. Choose the thoughts that invite miracles. Because when the quality of your thinking rises, your whole life becomes a reflection of heaven lived on earth. And the door to that heaven is always unlocked. You simply need to think your way home. Then let us in, not with noise, but with a whisper, the kind that reaches deeper than any shout ever could. Your life is not waiting on the outside, it is blooming from the inside. You are not here to collect thoughts like trophies or chase perfection through the mind. You are here to think in alignment with the truth you already are. So pause, breathe, and remember, the quality of your life is the quality of the thoughts you nurture when no one else is listening. Choose thoughts that return you to peace. Choose thoughts that remember your wholeness. Choose thoughts that make room for grace. And when in doubt, choose love. Because the most powerful thought you will ever think is, I already am. And from that knowing, everything changes forever.